Well, welcome to the White House on a very hot Washington afternoon. But, my name is Tina Chen. I am the executive director of the White House Council on Women and Girls. I also have the honor of serving as the First Lady's Chief of Staff. But we are here to celebrate history. One of the great things about working in the White House is there are occasionally moments where you really get to see history being made. And today, you get to really celebrate when history was made and a day really when the world changed. 40 years ago, on June 23rd, when 37 little words, as we were just talking about, just 37 little words became law in the United States of America, and the world changed for millions of girls around our country. I will say I personally am a pre-Title IX baby. I know I don't look it, but actually I went to high school before Title IX. And high school back then, for those of you who are that age, it didn't look anything like what your high schools look like now. There were no interscholastic girls' teams, none. There was gym class for girls, and that was it. We didn't learn how to play basketball. We didn't learn nobody knew what soccer was. We had none of that. And now I watch my 15-year-old daughter, who is out there competing every day, learning those life's lessons, growing stronger. And Title IX, as we'll hear about today, isn't just about athletics. It's about all of education and equal opportunity for women and girls across the educational spectrum. So we're going to hear today from athletes and academics, from leaders in this movement and advocates, from young women who are changing the world, and this is all about you. I will say that we are on Twitter, so if you are, like Valerie Jarrett, on Twitter, and you want to tweet something out and say that you're here at this, we are hashtag WHTitle1X, Title IX. So go ahead, actually Title IX, so you can tell I am not on Twitter. Hashtag WH Title IX and IX for Title IX. You could tweet that out. And you can tell people to watch us live. So hello to everybody out there watching us. We hope live streaming. We are live streaming as we speak the entire afternoon on whitehouse.gov. We're also today, in addition to the speakers you're going to hear from and the panelists that we will have, at the end of the day, we have girls from Girls Inc. and Girl Scouts with us. And they will have an opportunity at the end of the afternoon to be in a very small group mentoring sessions with some of the terrific athletes and academics and leaders that we have with us today. So it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. And to start us off, we're going to show you a brief video about really what Title IX is about and how it changed the world. So let's go to the video.
June 23rd, 1972 is an important day in the history of this country because of that breakthrough legislation which was passed, which really provided opportunities for women and girls that they had never had before in the history of this country.
The law is only 37 words, as I recall, but it has a big punch. Title IX is designed to provide equality of opportunity for young women. That was not the case before Title IX.
I graduated from college before Title IX passed, but my entire school experience was at a girls' school in high school and in college. So I was one of the few women my age who actually could play sports because women's schools and private schools had sports activities. Public schools and parochial schools didn't. They just stopped. So when I got to college, I learned how many girls my age had come out of a high school experience where, starting in about the 6th or 7th grade, sports just stopped. It didn't matter if they had talent or interest, there just weren't opportunities.
It's amazing, the change because of Title IX. And, it was just, very fortunate that I was able to see that and to understand how many people were going to benefit because of Title IX.
I think it really did make a huge, huge difference. We had kind of a joke in my family because I actually won the Teddy Roosevelt NCAA award for being a scholar athlete. That was in the days when there were no girls varsity sports, and so how I managed to get that award is beyond me. But the bottom line is it made a huge, huge difference in terms of the way that girls and women see each other as capable of competing on an equal field and winning.
In seventh grade, my first goal was to play in the NBA because the WNBA wasn't around. And I worked and I worked, and I was determined to be a player in the NBA and following my father's footsteps. And then the WNBA came around my freshman year in college at the University of Tennessee, and my goals switched. And it was kind of like a dream come true, just having the opportunity to not play with the NBA where I started, but wanting to play in the WNBA with ladies that have the same dreams and the same goals as me.
Everything's accepted now for women in athletics, and I think Title IX was a big part of that. And I know just as long as I've been coaching, just once Title IX came around, it just opened doors for so many people, and not just in basketball.
When I first got interested in this with the Equal Rights Amendment, which was sort of the grandfather of Title IX, my late wife said, well, Birch, you can't ignore the brain power of 53% of the American people. We tend to think of Title IX when we look at the sports pages. But when you really look at Title IX, the big benefit from Title IX comes from young women having the opportunity academically to learn.
The fact that we're sitting here today in 2012 with over half of the college students are women, over half of the graduate students in all kinds of fields are women, and the notion that one of the fastest growing segments of our economy are women-owned businesses. We know that opening the doors for women to be in science and technology and engineering are hugely important, not just for the advancement of those women and their families, but for this country, to lift up over half of our population and make sure that we are fully productive and fully prosperous in the future means empowering women and girls, and Title IX took a huge step in that direction.
Well, I believe it was so monumental when it was passed just because, obviously the opportunity that it has afforded all of us. And, when I think about what I'm able to do now, playing in the WNBA and being able to be such a huge role model for so many young girls, I think of all the people that came before us, and not just women, but even the men that helped in passing this law and in making it that important that girls get the same opportunity that men get.
I think it's probably exceeded the expectations because we didn't fully realize the degree of discrimination that was going on at the time. We've arrived. When you ask young women in high school, and really in some of our college and university teams, did Title IX help you? And you get a blank stare. What's Title IX? They don't think they're getting special treatment, and they aren't. They're being treated equally the way they should have been in the first place. Title IX made that possible.
Well, thank you to so many of you who participated in the video, and to our team at the Council on Women and Girls and our new media team here at the White House for putting that together. And we'll have that up on whitehouse.gov for all of you to retweet and download. The Council on Women and Girls, for those of you who don't know, was created by the President in March of 2009 by executive order. And it's a council that includes all of the federal agencies in the U.S. government and all of our White House offices to carry out the message that the President said that day, and that is every part of the federal government touches the lives of women and girls in some way, and therefore it's the responsibility of every part of the federal government to pay attention to women and girls, to their needs, in everything that we do, in our programs, in our policies, in how we spend our money, and how we set our priorities. And our cabinet, all across the board have been wonderful in carrying that out. And our leader in this effort, who is a dear friend, who is a champion for women and girls throughout the country, is my friend, the chair of the Council on Women and Girls and senior advisor to the President, Valerie Jarrett.
Thank you, Tina, and good afternoon, everyone. We are so excited to have you here. We've been talking about this for a very long time, so I want to welcome you to our 40th anniversary celebration. I'm so happy to look around the room and see so many dear friends and fierce advocates and leaders who are here with us today. And I'm especially delighted to see the young folks who are in the audience, who we are expecting to carry the torch going forward. So everyone who's under 18, stand up so we can get a good look at you. All right. So in 40 years, we expect you to be standing right here carrying on the 80th celebration. We want to thank everyone who has worked so hard to advance the fight for gender equity in our schools. It's why we're here to celebrate. 40 years of ensuring equality of education both in and outside of the classroom, and making sure that all of our school programs are springboards to success for everyone. As I think back over the last 40 years, and unfortunately I do remember the last 40 years, there have been so many achievements for women and girls since the passage of Title IX. But one of my favorite memories is one that I bet all of you who are my age will certainly remember. It was in September of 1973. Billie Jean is rolling her eyes. When the indomitable Billie Jean King beat the boastful Bobby Riggs in straight sets. Now, I was a huge tennis fan and a tennis player. I was taught by my dad, who took me out every weekend for as long as I could remember, because he believed it was so important to learn fair play, fierce competition, and to work hard. And he thought that if you learned that as a young person in sports, it would carry over into the rest of your life. So he instilled in me a passion for tennis. So you can imagine how I felt in the weeks leading up to that match with Billie Jean and Bobby Riggs. Bobby was on television weeks, literally weeks, national television, commanding the audience, talking about how he was going to win. Well, I watched the match with my parents, and Billie Jean, I can still remember sitting there, because when you won, when you went to that baseline and made history, we all jumped for delight. And we're so delighted to have Billie Jean with us today. Please give Billie Jean a round of applause. Well, a couple of decades later, I watched with great pride as my daughter Laura, who was a pretty good tennis player, not in your class, Billie Jean, as she competed in the state doubles competition. And I enjoyed every moment. Now, it was a little chilly in Chicago back then. It was about 40 degrees. But nonetheless, as a good parent, I was out there cheering her on. And I am confident that if it hadn't been for Billie Jean, you and so many like you who paved the way, my daughter would not have had that opportunity. When you were told that you couldn't compete, you had the courage to say, why not? And then you went out there and you did just as well as the guys, and oftentimes better. Take the story that you saw in the video of Pat Summitt, who I had the pleasure of meeting together with her son Tyler just last month when President Obama awarded her the Medal of Freedom and told her incredible story. Until last year, Pat was the head coach of the University of Tennessee's women's basketball team. And over the course of her career, Pat became the winningest college basketball coach of all time. But when she started out, life was a lot tougher for girls. Her family moved across the country when she was just 14, just to find a high school that had a basketball team for her. Her teammates were the very first U.S. women's basketball team to compete in the Olympics 36 years ago. As a first-time coach, she used to drive the vans to the away games. She took home the dirty uniforms and washed them herself. And oftentimes she had to sleep on the opponent's gym floor because she didn't have the money to pay for hotels for her young folks. But no one ever heard Pat or her players complain. More importantly, every player that went through her program not only excelled in basketball, but also either graduated from college or are on their way to graduate now. That's the kind of determination and hard work that has brought women's sports where it is today. In the 40 years since Title VII became law, the number of girls playing high school sports has increased by more than 1,000%. And today, female varsity athletes have one of the highest college graduation rates in the country, and they enter the workforce in higher numbers than non-athletes. Every single day, there are women taking the field, the court, the rink, the slopes, the tracks, steering their teams to fiercely fought victories, as well as gaining valuable leadership skills and self-confidence along the way. President Obama believes that empowering young women through sports is one of the best investments in our future. Earlier this year, he told ESPN, and I quote, "This is good not just for a particular college, not just for the NCAA, it is good for our society. It will create stronger, more confident women." The president knows this from firsthand experience. Coaching Sasha's basketball team is one of his favorite activities, and we're chuckling because we hear about it all the time. No matter what else is going on, he fights hard to protect that time on his schedule. He comes up with drills and strategies for the team, and he's so proud to watch Sasha and her teammates grow and learn to work together on the court. And as you know, the First Lady is also a passionate advocate for physical activity as a critical part of her Let's Move initiative. And she is thrilled to be leading the U.S. delegation to the opening ceremonies of the Olympic Games in London this summer, where our country will be represented by terrific young women competing under the proud banner of the American flag. But let's not forget, Title IX isn't just about sports. Title IX bans sex discrimination against girls and boys, by the way, in all programs at school and around the country, from addressing inequity in math and science education, to ensuring dormitories are safe, to preventing sexual assault on our college campuses, to fairly funding athletic programs. Title IX ensures equality for young people in every aspect of their education. And it's thanks in part to the legislation, like Title IX, that women are now accepted to college at higher rates than ever before, and that they are prepared to enter the workforce in a much broader range of fields, including engineering and technology. In the interest of keeping up those promising trends, President Obama has brought a fundamental commitment to advancing the interests of women and girls in every part of his administration. It's why he has not only appointed women to important positions, but he has empowered them to drive critical policy. That's why, as Tina mentioned, he created the White House Council on Women and Girls that I am so proud to chair. It's why he's reformed health care, helping millions of women obtain fair access to medical care that they and their families need. It's why he signed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, helping women receive equal pay for equal work. And it's why he has reaffirmed the administration's commitment to enforcing Title IX and continues to update its provisions to ensure access to STEM and career-ready courses, as well as sexual violence and harassment prevention. And of course, I could go on and on. We all know that the fight for progress is not over. But I'm here to tell you that President Obama and his entire administration is determined to continue to work with each and every one of you, and for all of those who are watching on the internet, to fight to defend a fair shot for everyone. I want to close today by sharing a story that makes me proud of how far we've come and how confident I am about where we're going. Last year, I joined the president with Tina when he welcomed the 3 winners of the International Google Science Fair to the White House. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, the Google Science Fair competition involves 10,000 middle and high school students from 91 countries around the world. And let me tell you, they had some pretty impressive projects. I don't know about you, but I certainly don't know very much about how to cure cancer at the age of 17. That was not what I was focusing on back then. In the end, the 3 winners who walked proudly into the Oval Office that day were all American girls. And as I watched them dazzle the president with the description of their projects, I realized that these young women embody the next generation of shattering the glass ceiling, the next generation that feels empowered to pursue every opportunity. That's why we've been fighting all these years, and that's why we're going to continue to fight. Now, our next speaker is a very distinguished public servant who developed the desire to fight for equality at a very young age. Growing up on a farm, run jointly by his grandparents, he saw his grandmother as an equal partner in every activity on the farm. He saw that she had a voice in every single decision, in the home and in the fields. And so he was shocked when he found out that under the law, she could not have inherited the land which she dedicated her life to. On one morning in 1940, at a family breakfast table, his father told his sister and him that he was going to testify before Congress that day. And so when the children said, "Well, Dad, what are you going to testify about?" His father said, "I'm going to tell them that little girls need strong bodies to carry their minds around just like little boys." He was also inspired by his late wife, Marvella, who educated him about discrimination against women in higher education after her experience of being told when she applied to a university, "Do not apply." The injustices stung, but they also sparked a lifelong commitment to standing up for the underrepresented. And he went on to spend decades fighting for civil rights for women and equality. I want you to join me in welcoming the person who sponsored and helped pass the legislation, who wrote those 37 very important words that are Title IX. Please join us, Senator Biden.
I had to take my glasses off to make sure I was seeing what I'm seeing here. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here with you. Valerie, I don't know your hard act to follow. I first met Valerie and Billie Jean and Tina when the previous president, with a different secretary, was trying to cut the knees off of Title IX. And I think the true test of how a ship sails is in the stormy seas. And so it is how individuals stand up and take on tough battles when it's not easy sledding. And it's been great to work with the two of you and Billie Jean and with all of you. You know, I was quoted accurately there. I don't know how to beat that. I would like to just stress one thing. We tend to think of both athletics and academics in terms of numbers. What percentage of young men? What percentage of young women? What is the grade point? How many people do we have on the field? To me, this whole business of Title IX is much more than numbers. It's about individual citizens. Individual young women and not so young women, and a few liberated men have been willing to stand up and be counted and to really make a difference. You know, I grew up on this farm with my grandparents, and we didn't know anything about politics. I remember when I graduated from high school, a good friend of my father's, who was in China in the Air Force at the time, in Kunming, He was the principal of a junior high school. He came out, and he put his arm around my shoulder and said, "Okay, Birch, you've graduated now. You have the opportunity to make a difference." To make a difference. And that is what I hope comes out of Title IX. It gives hundreds of thousands of women an opportunity that they would not have had previously to make a difference. To make a difference with their lives, the lives of their family, and the lives of their country. And it's been my privilege to play a small role in being here with all of you and in seeing those young women fly that flag gloriously representing us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Senator Bai, for your words today, your words on the video, but most importantly for your incredible leadership and how really you changed history. And we also remember people like Congresswoman Edith Green, who thought about this concept. As an Asian American woman, I'm proud of Congresswoman Patsy Mink, who was a champion for Title IX, as well. And it's important to pause and remember all those great history makers. Now it's time to introduce our next panel. So we're going to have our first panel, which is Intergenerational Views on the Impact of Title IX in Athletics. So if our panelists can come on up. We've got, I think, Billie Jean King, Amy Mullins, Shoni Schimmel, Tom Perez, and Laurel Richie. And our moderator for the panel is Bonnie Bernstein, ESPN broadcaster. She's a former All-American gymnast, and she's a fierce advocate and spokeswoman for women in sports. So come on up. Whichever's more comfortable for you. Yeah, turn the mics on.
Know to turn the mic on. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to those of you watching us live stream. As Tina has been so diligent in mentioning, we are on Twitter, so if you're watching and want to spread the word, again, it's hashtag WHTitle9, TITLE 1X. We had a very brief introduction of our panelists. I'll elaborate a little more. Not like Billie Jean King needs any more elaboration. She is one of the all-time greats in American tennis and founded the Women's Sports Foundation, which has done so many wonderful things, providing opportunities, resources, money for and advocacy for girls and young women. Tom Perez is the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, the U.S. Department of Justice. He was sworn in by the President back in 2009 after serving as the Secretary of Maryland's Department of Labor, Licensing, and Regulation. Welcome, Tom. Amy Mullins is a phenomenal woman in so many regards, because not only was she a rock star track and field athlete at Georgetown, but she hasn't had her legs below her knees since she was an infant and has been such a phenomenal advocate. And she is also an actress and a model, and all of these things that beautiful women can do. Shoni Schimmel, basketball player at Louisville, freshman All-American point guard, and interestingly enough, which I really want to talk to you about, grew up on a reservation in Oregon, played basketball, and found her way to Louisville. So we look forward to hearing about that story. And last but certainly not least, Laurel Ritchie, who everybody in the Girl Scouts knows. Before she was running things at the WNBA, she was the chief marketing officer at Girl Scouts and has 3 decades of incredible marketing and branding and PR experience. So we've got a pretty solid panel here that I'm very excited to moderate. And one quick, if I could, correction, Senator Bai, you did not play a small role. You played the most monumental role, and your resolve and your tenacity in very large part has made so many of us sitting in this room today who we are. So from the bottom of my heart and behalf of everybody, thank you so much for everything you have done and continue to do over the years. So since this panel spans a couple of generations, I would love to start with a little bit of perspective. Billy, can you talk to us about when you were younger and what the opportunities were like, or lack thereof, for women, particularly when you looked at some of your male counterparts in tennis and the opportunities that they were afforded?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank President Obama for having this celebration, to Tina, to Valerie, obviously to our godfather of Title IX, Senator Birch Bayh, one of my unbelievable heroes in my life, along with some of my sheroes and other heroes. And that's, I think Congresswoman Edith Green was mentioned. Also, Senator Ted Stevens was helpful. Dr. Bernice Sandler, all those people that were so important. And, you know, we stand on the shoulders of the generations. Each generation does. We pass the baton like a relay race in track and field. So it's just amazing that we're all here, and I just want to thank everyone and all the support team that made it possible for us to be here today. So I really appreciate it. I know all of us do. But back in my day, I went to California State. Well, it's a university now, but it was a college back in the 60s when I attended. And just 30 miles away down the road, Stan Smith had a full scholarship, and Arthur Ashe had a full scholarship, and Stan at USC and Arthur at UCLA. And I was working 2 jobs, and I was a playground director, which I loved. With elementary school, I loved that job. But I also was passing out equipment in the locker room, which that's the only job my whole life I never liked. But I thought I was living large. But when you look back, it's ridiculous that I was probably the best known athlete in the school. I was arguably the best tennis player, because we actually practiced with the men, which was really great. I wish more schools would do that. Even now, I think it made a big difference. So it was very different. And also in high school, we didn't have traveling teams. We just played intra-school or intramural type of things. And they had GAA points and all these things, and I wouldn't get any points because I went off campus to do my tennis and all that. So it's amazing how times finally have changed. But I'll never forget when Title IX was passed, because it was so important to all of us, and not just sports, but for all of education. And growing up with other people, and actually a lot of kids who played tennis ended up being in science. Sally Rides one, and I was talking to Mae Jemison about, you know, Sally was a tennis player and ended up being an astronaut as well, and all those things. So you just never know. But I just know sports teaches you how to be resilient, and just teaches you to get up every day and just keep going, and, you know, to recharge your battery, to be the best you can be. And as Senator Birch Bayh said, to make a difference in this world. Because every single human being's an influencer, every single one.
Laurel, if we can just pass the mic down, thank you. Do you happen to remember when Title IX was passed? You were a synchronized swimmer. That was your sport. Yeah. Can you reflect back on that time and paint a picture for us?
You know, it's really interesting. I think back, I was a synchronized swimmer and a cheerleader, and I think in some ways that is a testament to the world before Title IX, because I think those are sports that, or activities that are most often associated with women. And I think for me at the time when I was growing up, I didn't think of other opportunities, because I was sort of, either because of my own self-perception or those around me, that's what I gravitated to because that's what girls did.
Would you have pursued a different sport, you think, if Title IX had been around?
Honestly, I don't know, but when I look at the next generation and I look at what my nieces are doing, they're doing a whole range of activities, and I really believe that's because of Title IX, because they grew up in an environment where they knew no boundaries, either overtly or covertly. They just grew up thinking, what do I like to do, what am I good at, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I don't think they had the same sense of being gently or firmly steered in one direction or another.
Amy, I think your situation's fascinating in and of itself simply because you were an amputee and just developing a sense of strength and confidence. Can you speak to how athletics has really played a role in who you've become?
Sure. Well, not a day goes by that I don't draw on it, including today when I was dropped off at the wrong terminal in New York and had to sprint. And I was like, bring it out, girl, bring it. I'm in the wrong shoes, a silk jumpsuit, and this guy was like, you're really fast. I was like, thank you. And I, walking, the cab dropped me off the wrong part of, the government complex, and I think I walked like 3 miles and then had to go up those stairs, and I was like, you are an athlete. You can do this. And but all, in all seriousness, whether it's going out on stage to present a keynote address in front of 1,000 people or do a play, sports taught me how to own my body, and quite in a very literal way, my whole connection with the ground has always been imagined. And I think if I wasn't such a physical child, and the fact that I was surrounded, my mom is one of 11 kids, 9 girls and 2 boys, and we were always playing sports. We played everything, and the 9 girls had their own, we all had our own team. So my mother taught my brothers and I how to throw and catch, and bought us baseball cards for Christmas gifts. And so that sense of, I grew up as one of those kids that was completely ignorant of the fact that there had to be a law mandating the opportunities presented to me. I thought I was there because I was good enough. And as I went into collegiate sports and in the NCAA in Division I was fortunate enough to have the reception of a wonderful coaching staff at Georgetown University that embraced that chutzpah and that confidence of a girl that thought she was good enough. And so there I was on these woven carbon fiber sprinting legs, running against the next FloJos.
Are they called cheetah? Cheetah? Is
Yeah,
that what
they're modeled after the hind leg of a cheetah. I know. And but sports has provided the biggest adventure of my life, and I'm still drawing on everything I've learned every day.
And the person who saw her running today, who said she was fast, he wasn't kidding. Before she retired, what did you say? I think she set the world record in the 100, the 200, and the long jump. So this woman was no joke. Shawnee's the puppy among us today. You're going into your junior year, right? Next year in Louisville, right?
Yes.
I'm fascinated. Could you share with us what it was like growing up, trying to find your way as an athlete on a reservation, and what sort of opportunities were available for you?
Well, definitely growing up on a reservation was more different than your everyday kind of American, just because not many Native Americans do come off the reservation because they get stuck in stuff such as drug and alcohol. So I mean, just growing up and being around all my family and just seeing them and watching them play sports, it was just kind of an opportunity for me to go ahead and do it and get off the reservation and prove to everybody that you can do it. You can go out there and achieve your dreams and whatnot.
And what was that experience like, just having the courage to say, I have to leave the reservation, I need to go to a public school to give myself an opportunity to get to college and play?
Well, that goes out to my mom mainly, just because she was always there pushing me, and she was the main one out there like wanting us to do the best we could do, and she let us do that because she, as a parent, didn't get to do that, and so she got a job at Franklin, and so just her leading us by example, like many other people out here, is just, she taught us to go out there and do the best you can.
I'm glad we have Tom on the panel because I think so many of us, when we talk about Title IX, we only relay it to athletics. And Title IX embodies so much more than that. Just having all of the civil rights experience that you have, can you sort of take us through an expedited timeline of all of the different facets of the world that Title IX touches and how it's evolved?
Certainly. I'm glad Title IX touches athletics as the father of 2 daughters, one of whom is a 16-year-old in the front row here. And we
bonded over gymnastics.
And we spent last weekend, Bonnie, in Pennsylvania with her travel lacrosse team at a tournament. And there were roughly 100 college coaches, recruiters, who were there looking at all the kids. And I turned to her before, Senator, and I said, you have him to thank, you have her to thank, you have so many people to thank for that opportunity that we all take for granted in my kids' generation.
I actually almost went up and gave the senator a hug, although I've never met him, so I thought that would be inappropriate. But I will at some point before I leave, just because I think. I'm sorry.
But you're absolutely correct that it is indeed about athletics, and it's about so much more. It's about saying to people like Dr. Benjamin, a good friend, Regina Benjamin, the Surgeon General of the United States, who's here today, that the pathways of opportunity for everyone are going to be open, and it's up to you to seize those opportunities. And we have so many cases that involve making sure that science, technology, engineering, and math, those pathways are indeed open to everyone. We have a lot of cases that involve basic issues of harassment, whether it's in the junior high school where students are getting harassed. We have emerging issues now involving same-sex harassment. We just completed a groundbreaking consent decree in the suburbs of Minneapolis-St. Paul involving kids who didn't conform to the gender stereotypes, and they were being harassed and bullied, and frankly, a number of them tragically took their own lives. And the school system was not responding adequately, and we can use Title IX to address those issues because that is so critically important. We have a case now involving the University of Montana and allegations that their response to serious sexual assaults has been insufficient, and we're investigating those allegations. Making sure now that the Citadel and the Virginia Military Institute, while those weren't Title IX cases per se, those were cases involving using our tools in the Justice Department to open up pathways to leadership and opportunity for women. And so there's so much above and beyond the critical athletics conversation that we're having today that is part of the illustrious history of Title IX.
It's really so all-encompassing. I actually have a Title IX story, which I didn't realize at the time. Gymnastics was my primary sport, and I went to the University of Maryland. And after our freshman year, our basketball coach got in trouble for all of these NCAA recruiting violations, and the school had to give back a lot of money to the NCAA. They instituted a scholarship freeze. There was a postseason ban for the basketball team, but there was a pretty severe ripple effect in the athletic community on campus at College Park, so much so that they actually contemplated cutting sports. And I was brought in. I somehow became sort of a student leader talking to the media type. Who knew? I guess it was a little bit of foreshadowing. But I wound up sitting in front of this panel, and they were peppering me questions about opportunities that I was given. Did I feel like I was being treated fairly, and this and that? And I think I came to find out afterwards that gymnastics inevitably was not cut because Title IX ensured equality in numbers and in sports on campus. And so personally, I'm so thankful for it. But what I've learned over the years, and this has been corroborated in all sorts of research, is that a good number of upper-level executives in companies throughout this country, female executives, have athletic backgrounds. So much of the character we build as athletes, skill sets that we develop, are parlayed into professional success. And with that, I would love to go down the panel and see if you would share if you have one particular skill set or something that you took from sports that has been so vital in your success and vibrancy in life.
Well, I think there's so many things we do learn, but I'm a small businesswoman, so I learn all the lessons I learned in sports every single day of my life. I think one of them, because I'm mature compared to most of you here, is resiliency. Resiliency. Getting up every morning and know it's a blessing to be awake and to thank God that I've got this day to look forward to, that hopefully, maybe I can make a small difference.
When have you needed that resiliency most, you think?
I think I've needed it in my personal life as well as my business life, and persevering, being resilient to persevere, they kind of go together, obviously. And I just think without having that sense of, see, I always think of losing as just feedback. I don't think of it as losing. I'm serious, and it really has helped it's helped me to be optimistic. But when I hear the young athletes, then I know that we really are getting there. And young people who've gotten educated, thank God for Title IX. But could I just say something? There's a lot of great athletes in here. Why don't you guys stand up? Because I just don't feel right without all of you, like Donna De Verona, who was really helpful with Title IX, Nancy Hogshead, Benita Fitzgerald, Lynn St. James, just to name a few. Lillian
Nancy Lieberman.
I mean, oh, Nance, you're here too. Nancy
I just
Lieberman.
saw Nancy in the audience.
So I just think you guys are, it was great to see all your faces and all the things we've done together many times, I know, with the Women's Sports Foundation, but all the things, you had your own foundations and whatever. I just love you guys, and you've been so great. We're like a team in life. I just love it, so thank you.
Okay, so we have resiliency.
Being part of a team. I've coached my one daughter in basketball, my other daughter in basketball. I helped my son in baseball. He says to me last night when we're driving home from his game, "The umpire stunk." Or my teammate, he committed an error at the worst time. And you know what? We all are part of a team, the team of our family, the team at my workplace, the team on the baseball or the lacrosse field. And that's life, being part of a team. You're part of something that's bigger than yourself, knowing your role. Your roles evolve. Sometimes I was the point guard on my team. Sometimes I was the 12th man. But always I was part of a team. And I think sports really teaches that. And in our workplace now, in the Civil Rights Division, we are part of a team. And we've got a remarkable team who are in the business of expanding opportunity for everyone. And everyone fits in a different way, but everybody fits in a really important way.
Yeah, my mind is racing with, I mean, how do you choose one? But since you talked about team, I think about leadership. There's these posters everywhere, right? There is no I in team, and I have to disagree. I think a team is a bunch of I's. And what sports teaches you is to find that voice, own that voice, but yield when someone else deserves the opportunity, the spot, and their turn to lead. And I think that acknowledgement and being humble, the humility that makes us stronger, and I learned that as an athlete.
How are you a leader now?
I too am a small business owner as a woman. And just tonight, I'm on a midnight flight to Istanbul, and I'm going to present a keynote speech on Friday to 800 CEOs. And I have to think about, for myself, leadership always, and for all of us, it starts from a personal place. If you can stand up for the things that you believe in and take your own advice and lessons, I think life is full of the kinds of gifts and opportunities that make it incredible.
Shoni, you're not a young businesswoman yet. You're still playing. But what are you most proud of so far in your athletic career as somebody who is continuing to grow and learn? You were an All-American your freshman year. You're a point guard, so you're running the team a lot. You're bringing the ball up, passing it off, distributing. What characteristic do you think has been so critical to your success so far as an athlete?
I mean, there's a ton, but I would just say being grateful for waking up every day and just being given this opportunity to be able to go out there and play something that I love and that I've been doing since I was 4 years old. I mean, what else could you do? So, I mean, it's great. I mean, it's awesome.
How do you think people view you back on the reservation? Because you spoke to how it's tough for a lot of people to get off. There are challenges. When you communicate with family at home, when you have the opportunity to go back home, how do you think they view you?
I would definitely say as a role model, just because I did get off the reservation and go out and do what I love, but make something for the other kids to go out there and reach for. So, I mean, just, it's something they can do. They just have to put their mind to it and just go out there and do it.
I can only imagine you probably have a list of 10 of them.
Well, I think first and foremost to be recognized as an athlete with my fellow panel members, I think we've got to take that quite liberally. I'm not sure, I consider, I don't know that I can actually answer the question exactly from that perspective when it's up against Billie Jean King. But anyway.
I don't know how you stay underwater as long as you do in your synchronized swimming. I get all the claustrophobic and upside down.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the important thing for me and what I have carried forward is, and it's echoes some of the comments that have been mentioned, there's something about, particularly in team sports, where you have to absolutely bring your personal best, but then you also have to give as much effort into making the teamwork and the interconnectivity. So it's this very interesting balance of the individual and the team, and being in constant calibration of that. And I draw upon that every single moment of my work life, of figuring out when to lean forward, when to go out in front, when to support, and always being conscious and extremely conscious of those around me and what am I doing to lift them up. Because if I'm lifting just myself up, it doesn't work. It requires all of us to lift up together.
Two traits that come to mind that we haven't talked about here yet. One for me is time management. When I was in high school, I was doing gymnastics, indoor track, outdoor track, student council, Latin club, and trying to keep my grades up. And when you train as much as you do in gymnastics, and I would train 3, 4, 5 hours a day, and you're committed to doing all of the other things in your life well, you have to be very structured. The other thing I found to be really important in life is understanding the importance of being coachable. We all have room to grow. The only way you can improve as an athlete is to take the guidance of those who are coaching you, take it to heart, and try to improve every day. And I think sometimes when we receive feedback, we don't necessarily want to accept it right away because we think we're doing the best we can. But just being able to soak up all of the information that's coming at you from different directions and channel that into making yourself better in whatever capacity that may be. I think so much of that, for me, comes from athletics. As somebody who is president of the WNBA, Laurel, it's a sport, and I thought it was so fitting that in the video that we showed beforehand, we had different generations of Tennessee basketball. We had Pat Summitt, who is so closely associated with the sport and started coaching there in her early 20s and worked her way up to be one of the greatest coaches of all time in any sport, really, as far as I'm concerned. And then we had Tamika Catchings, who so poignantly said that as she got older and understood the benefits of Title IX, she changed her goals. She changed her goals of, not just getting a scholarship as an athlete, but playing in the WNBA. Laurel, I mean, you've had to be a pretty quick study of the league. You went there in 2011. Can you speak to how generations of Title IX, how we've been able to accumulate now the sort of depth in the sport that ultimately will give your league longevity?
Yeah, I always look at the seemingly small moments that actually speak volumes. So I have a 6-year-old niece who went to her first professional basketball game, which was the Chicago Sky of the WNBA, and loved it. And then a couple months later, she went to a Chicago Bulls game, and she turned to her mother and she said, "Mommy, I didn't know boys played basketball." And
That gets around.
I just love that because I'm thinking, like, I can't even put into words all that's loaded in that very simple exchange. And she had no judgment. It was for her just a mere observation of, good for those boys. They get to do this too. So I look at the way in which she's growing up, and it just is the way it is. I also know that we are now at a point where we have a WNBA player whose son is playing in the NBA. So there are these beautiful...
Who is that?
It's not a current player.
Okay.
But a mother who has given birth to a son who's in the NBA. So I just think that we're seeing lots of changes. Or I think of Candace Parker, whose husband and her brother play. They're all symbols and manifestations of how, because of Title IX and the legislators who made it happen, so thank you for that, and the trailblazers who actually delivered it on the ground and did the hard work, we're now at a place where I think the vision of Title IX is coming to bear fruit. And so it's a beautiful thing. The other thing that I think is really important, and it's why gatherings like this are so important, is we have to remember the history. We have to, just as my niece doesn't remember a time where it was different, all of us need to remember that there was a time where it's different so that we can continue to celebrate it, to be grateful of it, and to make sure that we don't backslide with that. And I know the women of the WNBA, as I meet with them and talk with them, every single one of them is very cognizant of the opportunity, very cognizant that this wasn't available for the generation before, and they're doing all they can to make sure that it's available for the next generation.
Shoni, what do you think the level of awareness is among your teammates and athletes your age? Because we're now 40 years into Title IX. I suppose it's easy enough to forget because it is such an everyday part of our lives. I mean, do you ever have those conversations with your friends or hear about those things in people in your age group?
You hear about it more often now just because everybody's getting more into it and whatnot. So, I mean, we've had Dr. Sanders come over and we recognized her at one of our games. And so, I mean, that was a big honor for us being at University of Louisville and just having her there. And so, I mean, we introduced her and just continue, like, it's getting more out there, and so it's better that way.
Let's take this a little bit big picture. I think we all know that childhood obesity is a national epidemic. Women's Sports Foundation is one of myriad organizations dedicated to getting women up and active. Billy, how do you think we need to lean on Title IX as one aspect of fighting the childhood obesity fight?
Well, we have to, because first of all, it's preventable. It's preventable. And I'm on the President's Council for Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition. Shelley Foll is the executive director who's here today. And every time we have a meeting and all the literature, we're always constantly worrying about this. Recently, there's young people have 7 to 8 hours of screen time looking at videos. Well, the industry now is with us, and they're going to create more and more videos where the kids have to exercise. So here's something that caused a sedentary life now can help be a part of change. It's not the only thing, but it can be a part of change in the right direction. Also, I think it has a lot to do with families. It's just not about telling kids in school. I find parents really dictate a lot in how they bring their children up, or caregiver or guardian, whoever's bringing up that child. I really notice it's very much a family thing. You know what I'm talking about when you see families, they're out eating, because I eat out for everything, so I'm probably not a good example. I don't have an organic farm in the backyard because I live in New York City. So it's family. Like my mom and dad were big on my brother and I. My brother was a Major League Baseball player in his day, Randy Moffett. Moffat's my birth name. And our parents were so big on movement. My mother is 90 years old now, and the one thing she always says, you've got to keep moving or it's over. Now, so she instilled that.
I hope she didn't mean that literally.
No, she does mean it literally because she's 90, she has a walker, but she tells me, she gives me a report every day of how long she's been walking and how many times she got up and walked. And she knows it's absolutely vital. But I grew up in an environment like that. I'm one of the lucky ones, my brother and I. A lot of children do not have that. Also, the urban challenges. The urban challenge is really big. So I think, as I said earlier, each one of us is an influencer in this room and in this world, and people are watching. We can make a difference every single day in how we try to influence others to do the right thing and to take good care of ourselves. Because health is wealth. Health is wealth. Because when you don't have your health, boy, I tell you, your life, particularly they've found that if mothers in a family are of ill health, then the whole family falls apart. So for girls and women, it's absolutely vital, and for our boys too, because everyone is influencing each other, like being on a team when you were talking about it. We're in this world together, men and women. We need to help each other, be the best we can be, and be champions in life, and that means obviously with our health and taking good care of ourselves. So I just think it gets down to personal responsibility. I'm real big on that, and trying to help each other. Because a lot of times we don't have the education. It's not that people wouldn't do it, they just don't understand. You know, they haven't been influenced or had the knowledge given to them. So we've always got to be good to each other and help each other. Because everyone's got strengths and weaknesses. You know, what we're born into and all those different things. And we got to just go for it. Everyone's got to be a coach and be coachable, as you said. Women are supposed to be very coachable, from what I understand from coaches. Do we have coaches here today? Why don't you stand up, please? Because I want to thank the coaches. Thank you. Coaches are the unsung heroes. That's the one area we need to improve in with Title IX, because in college only 43% of women actually coach women's teams, and in men's teams we're about 3%. So that really needs to be improved, and they're the unsung sheroes and heroes. Sheroes this case. But I want to thank you, because I think each one of us, if we think about our coaches in life, whether it be a parent or our coaches in sports, have made such a difference. They've changed my life. So, and I grew up in team sports. I didn't grow up in tennis. Tennis was my last sport, so I'm a basketball nut. So I'm thrilled you're here.
Amy, how well do you feel Title IX and opportunities for women have been implemented in the Paralympic space?
Oh, well, we're seeing that whole movement go in leaps and bounds. I mean, 1995 was when I started running at Georgetown, and to be the first amputee, male or female, there at Division I. 17 years later, we've got a Paralympic team that's really, I hope you all tune in this summer, but we've got sprinters who are running the 400 meter in under 46 seconds. And then if you watch the Winter Games, you've got, or the X Games, where ESPN does an incredible job of integrating. You've got people going down a mountain at 75 miles an hour who are blind. I mean, I don't consider that a disabled athlete. I think that's super abled. Quite honestly. So the fact that, in a very real way, like for me, I never knew another amputee growing up. I mean, my whole childhood was pre-Google, right? So you couldn't just type in prosthetic on a search engine and find out everything that's being made around the world. So I had wooden legs the first time, and like tennis, track was my last sport. I was a team sport, volleyball, softball. I was on a state championship softball team. I was a great center fielder. I miss my glove right now. But track for me was like, why would anyone want to do that? Why would anyone want to run without a ball to take your mind off of how much your body's hurting? And so for me, it was just, really the naivete of exploring something like that. And then I arrived at the perfect time and place to be the guinea pig for an entirely new kind of technology that would revolutionize prosthetics and forever change the way the athletes who wear them would be perceived. And we're right in the middle of this incredibly profound shift that has a lot of parallels to racial integration of sport, to gender integration of sport. And I'm thrilled to be, in the forefront of that whole movement, but to get people to understand that every single one of us at some point is going to need an assistive medical device, whether temporarily or more. Donna just pointed to her knee. She's like, rebuilt, prosthetic, right? It's all around us. It's all around us. And people are going to be living, 30 and 40 years longer after retirement. They don't want to become inactive. People want to stay relevant. People want to stay engaged with their lives. And so all of this is going to affect how we see and demand inclusion and integration for all of our athletes. And there's been landmark legislation done in Maryland in the last few years about this. Yes, Lillian is aware of this, that mandates, and really use Title IX as the precedent to say every athlete in these schools, high schools and college, deserves access. And so it is, probably when you delivered those 37 words on the floor 40 years ago, maybe you didn't even consider the ripple effect and how far-reaching the ramifications would go and how many other groups of Americans would have their lives changed by it.
You totally teed me up, Amy. Thank you. Senate floor 1972. Senator Birch Bayh. While the impact of this amendment would be far-reaching, it is not a panacea. It is, however, an important first step in the effort to provide for the women of America something that is rightfully theirs, an equal chance to attend the schools of their choice, to develop the skills they want, and to apply those skills with the knowledge that they will have a fair chance to secure the jobs of their choice with equal pay for equal work. We have come so far in 40 years with Title IX, but legislation is an ever-evolving animal. Tom, where do we have to go from here? Where can we continue to grow as far as Title IX is concerned to provide opportunities across all of the platforms that we've talked about today?
Well, one of the most famous women in America, retired Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, wrote in an opinion that related to admissions policies in higher ed that the pathways of leadership must be visibly open to, in that case, it was to everyone, is what she was talking about. And we still see that while we have indeed made a lot of progress, there's still a lot of work to do. Regina Benjamin is, again, a role model for so many, but she is all too frequently the exception and the outlier. And we see this in science, technology, engineering, and math. And so we still have a lot of work to do there. We still see pervasive harassment that we work with the Department of Education to combat. And it's sometimes in the K-12 context. It's sometimes girls who get harassed. It's sometimes same-sex harassment that I talked about before, the pervasive problem of bullying. Bullying is not a rite of passage. It's something that should be extinguished, and that's why this president has taken such a personal role in doing that. And we see the persistence of those challenges both at the K-12 setting and in the higher ed setting. That's why we continue to look at the response, making sure that campuses are safe for women. That's really what the investigation we're doing with the Department of Education in Montana is about, is making sure that it is indeed safe. So we continue to have these legacy issues, and then we have these emerging issues, and we're thankful that we have that foundation that Senator Bayh and so many other courageous leaders gave to us, and that is what gives me great hope that the next frontier can continue to be a very, very productive frontier.
Well, Senator Bayh may be the godfather. In my lifetime, I can think of seldom few more staunch advocates of Title IX than the gracious woman next to me. So, Billy, if you would be kind enough to do closing remarks on the panel and what you would like to see going forward. No pressure. I mean, you've done this before.
Are you kidding?
Yes, I'm kidding. Okay, thanks for coming, everybody.
But what are you hoping for? Well, my hope is exactly the 37 words, that every single human being, boy or girl, man or woman, has an opportunity to be who he or she is and not be bullied, not be harassed, to have a productive life, to have choices, to hear their own voice. All the things that Title IX represents. It's about boys and girls. It's not about just girls. And I think that's important to remember because a lot of people think girls have really hurt boys' sports, et cetera, and they haven't. More boys and more girls are playing sports today than ever before. As far as the STEM area of it, you'll be hearing about that just in a couple of minutes. But it's so important in this country to be competitive with the rest of the world, no matter what endeavor it may be, because we're no longer. In my day, I had to compete against Europeans and Australians, and now you have to compete against the whole world. In sports are just a microcosm of society. That's all they are. Just look at sports and you know what's going on in society. So women and girls have a long way to go. I think when you talk about history, I think it's important that everyone understands and knows about history. And the more you know about history, the more you know about yourself. And what it really says is that we've got to, what are we going to do with this information, and how are we going to pass the baton, and how are the younger generations are going to carry it through to even upgrade and elevate what was started June 23rd, 1972. But everyone can make a difference, and everyone can make this dream come true. And thank you for having me. It's been an honor, and I really appreciate it. God bless America.
One of the greatest statistics, girls' involvement in athletics has jumped 1,000% since Title IX was passed in 1972. So all of our missions collectively going forward, raise the number. Laurel, Shoni, Amy, Tom, Billie Jean King, thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed the panel. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. That was perfect. And I want to thank Senator Bayh. He is catching a plane to go to Indiana, I know, to attend a WNBA game to celebrate Title IX in his home state of Indiana. And I know Billie Jean and her partner, another tennis great in her own right, Alana Kloss, have to catch a plane, so they are dashing out. And Billie Jean did a little bit of this, but I want to do it again. We have in our audience, and I'm at the risk of leaving somebody out, I'm going to do it anyway. We've got a great group of tremendous athletes and coaches in their own right who are here. So I'm going to list off Linda Mastandrea, Nancy Lieberman, Alana, who just left, Alana Kloss, Renee Brown, Sue Rankin, Donna DiVerona, Nancy Hogshead-Maker, Sarah Hughes, Lillian Green Chamberlain, Greta Eliason, Lindsay Adams Hawkins, Lynn St. James, Kelly, Amante Hiller, Zara Dawson, and Lauren Sears. And thank you to all of you for being such great role models and just great athletes for all of us for so many years. And now, as we heard, on the panel, Title IX is about equal opportunity in education. And one of the things that our administration feels so strongly about is pursuing and pushing forward Title IX. And it is, just been wonderful to have as one of the great champions of Title IX, one of the great champions of education in our country. And in my personal view, one of the best secretaries of education we have ever had. And on top of that, he's, not a bad basketball player himself. Let me introduce a fellow Chicagoan, Secretary Arne Duncan.
Thank you so much, Tina, for that kind introduction. I'm thrilled to be here. We have a room full of legends, just amazing people, and I'll be brief. I stand between you and another great panel, Dr. Jemison and others. Thank you so much for your leadership. But this is a remarkable day, and one of the reasons I'm so pleased to be here is I think one thing we don't do enough in education is to celebrate success and to celebrate progress. And I think today, what we've seen over the past 40 years of Title IX is one of the greatest educational and civil rights success stories that we've ever seen. It's just an amazing, amazing story. Obviously, so many of us here are big believers in the value of college sports. I can't actually think of another institution other than maybe the military that does so much to shape the future of our country and to shape the future leaders of our country than intercollegiate athletics. Student athletes learn so many lessons on the court and on the playing field that are frankly hard to teach in other settings. Lessons like teamwork, commitment, the ability to adapt and to persevere, and discipline. And I'm thrilled that so many of the great athletes are here. Billie Jean King, Nancy, where's Nancy Lieberman? Nancy just stepped out. I'll grab her later. I have a little story about Nancy. But just some absolute legends here who have done fantastic work. But it's precisely because college athletics play such an essential role that we must be vigilant about ensuring equal opportunity for men and women as we move forward. And we cannot do things that unnecessarily dissuade women or limit their opportunities. And this is obviously a personal issue for me and for so many of us in this room. I was lucky enough to play college sports, and so did my sister. In fact, she was a much better basketball player than I was. And she was an early beneficiary of Title IX and actually went on to play professionally for a couple years overseas. But I'll also tell you that the best athlete in our family wasn't my sister or myself, it was my mother. And she beat me in the backyard one-on-one for years and years, and actually quit playing tennis because I got tired of getting beat by her. But obviously people of her generation didn't have the opportunity to pursue their dreams at the collegiate level. When Title IX was enacted in 1972, less than 30,000 female students participated in sports and recreational programs at the collegiate level. And today, that number has increased nearly sixfold, just remarkable, remarkable change. At the high school level, as we just heard, it's a tenfold increase since 1972. 3 million young women around the country every single year participate in high school athletics. When Congress enacted Title IX, it seemed to simply enshrine a universal sentiment that everyone believed in. Title IX prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. And yet this very simple, frankly unexceptional 36-word-long provision has forever altered our high schools and colleges for the better. As all of you know, the benefits of Title IX stretch far, far beyond the athletic field or the basketball court. Women athletes are much more likely to graduate from college than female students who don't play sports. You sort of have that dumb jock myth or stereotype. It's simply not true. Athletes consistently graduate at higher levels. They're also less likely to use drugs, to become pregnant while a teenager, or to become obese. And obviously that's not all. The economic returns of Title IX have been immense. One study of Title IX by Wharton professor Betsy Stevenson found that up to 40% of the overall rise in employment among women between 25 and 30 years old, that was attributable to Title IX, 40%. And contrary to the fears and doubts of some skeptics, Title IX absolutely did not become a zero-sum proposition. New opportunities for women didn't mean fewer opportunities for men. Title IX has been a win-win law that benefits both men and women. Since Title IX was enacted, the number of men playing college sports has actually increased. And more men than women are still playing in college sports, even though now women significantly outnumber men on college campuses. So we have absolutely come a long, long way and should be so proud by that progress. But we still clearly have a distance to travel before educational institutions truly provide equal opportunities to participate in athletics for both men and women. And to conclude, I want today to not only celebrate Title IX's extraordinary impact and value over the past 40 years, but to reaffirm its great potential to advance equity in the next 40 years as we move forward. New opportunities for women in intercollegiate sports get most of the headlines, most of the publicity, but they're only a piece of Title IX's enduring legacy. As President Obama has pointed out, Title IX actually does not even mention sports. Title IX has the potential to make similar striking advances and opportunities that girls have in the STEM disciplines that we're going to hear about next. And we're working so hard in our department to ensure that schools make available rigorous standards that help prepare all students, regardless of gender, for both college and career, including access to science, technology, engineering, and math. And while we made some progress in closing the gender gap there at the higher level classes, the AP classes in the STEM fields, we still see an underrepresentation of young girls, and we have to improve upon that going forward. This landmark law prohibits sex discrimination, has other far-reaching implications in schools and universities that receive our federal funds. To just cite one example, our Office of Civil Rights that Russ Ali does an amazing job of leading has redoubled enforcement of Title IX and issued groundbreaking guidance with respect to sexual harassment and sexual violence on college campuses. Title IX similarly prohibits discrimination against pregnant and parenting students. In pre-Title IX, so often those students are actually forced out, pushed out of school. And we will continue to do everything we can to make sure that their rights are protected and that discrimination against pregnant and parenting students is simply not tolerated. So I just want to thank all of you for coming out today and joining in the celebration. As a nation, I think we've accomplished far more than anyone imagined under Title IX, and I absolutely believe that the next 40 years as we move forward under Title IX hold the promise for more fantastic opportunities for educational advancement. And now we look forward to a great, great panel on the STEM disciplines. Thanks for having me this afternoon.
Thank you, Secretary Duncan. And he's really set us up nicely for our next panel, which really is about advancing our commitment to Title IX in education. So if I can ask our next panel to join us, we have Mae Jemison, Ruslan Ali, Gabriella Farfan, Jared Cohen, and our moderator, who I'm really delighted to introduce. Our moderator is Benita Fitzgerald Mosley. Benita is a U.S. gold medal Olympian in track and field. She is a world-class athlete. She is currently the Chief of Sport Performance for USA Track and Field. And she also happens to be an engineer who's had a successful career in technology. She is the embodiment of all parts of Title IX. So she is terrific, and I want to let me turn it over to Benita, who will really give you an introduction of all our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina. Thank you, Valerie. And Arnie, for having me here today. Such an exciting time, 40 years of Title IX. And yes, Valerie, I too remember 40 years ago. So this panel is going to feature, obviously, some very notable people in the area of science, technology, engineering, and math. And we want to just really shed a light on the importance of the impact of Title IX beyond the playing field, particularly in STEM areas in education and career choices. And our panelists are going to speak about their involvement with Title IX, the impact it's had on them and their lives and their careers and their education, and how President Obama particularly is helping to advance the law in his administration. And I hope they'll also offer some thoughts on kind of the future of the law and how we can continue to uphold it, both for education and athletics. I'll start by introducing our panelists. First, to my left is Mae Jemison. You probably all know her as the first woman of color ever to launch into space with the Space Shuttle Endeavour back in September 12, 1992. Again, she's the first woman of color to go into space, and actually she's from Chicago as well, and the first Chicagoan ever to go into space. She now is involved with the 100-Year Starship, which is an initiative to take humans to another star, which was started by DARPA, which is an acronym for the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. She's going to talk a little bit more about that later. She's a former professor from Dartmouth, and one of the things I thought was really interesting about her, both she's a medical doctor, and so yes, she's got that varied background as well, but she was named one of People's Most Beautiful People issue back in 1993. So I think that's pretty cool, too. Next is Ruslan Ali. You guys are not in the order of my papers, so you're going to have to be a little patient with me. She was appointed Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights for the U.S. Department of Education by President Barack Obama in March of 2009, and then the Senate confirmed her in May of 2009. And she's responsible for, she's the primary advisor on civil rights and responsible for enforcing U.S. civil rights laws as they pertain to education. She, prior to becoming the Assistant Secretary of Education, she served as Vice President of the Education Trust here in Washington, D.C., and as a founding executive of the Director of the Education Trust West in California. She is a former teacher and attorney. She got her JD from Northwestern University School of Law and her bachelor's degree from American University. Ruslan Ali. Next to her is a student who has Gabriella Farfan. She's a geology major at Stanford University, and hails from Madison, Wisconsin. She won one of the top awards in the Intel Science Talent Search for her independent research describing why certain gemstones appear to change color when viewed from different angles. Her work has a potential applications in nanotechnology and material science. She's also a Hispanic Scholar Awardee. So, Gabriella, welcome. And lastly, is it Jared Cohen? Okay, good, Jared. He's a university professor at Carnegie Mellon University, and he's been, he's the 8th president of Carnegie Mellon and been there as president since 1997. During his presidency, Carnegie Mellon has continued along his trajectory of integration and growth, and under his leadership, Carnegie Mellon University has really spread all over the world, from Asia and Australia, Europe and Latin America, all the way to Doha, Qatar. And he also has, they've also started programs and a site in California, Silicon Valley. So he was appointed by 3 different presidents, President Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama, into various posts within their administrations, most recently President Obama to the Homeland Security Advisory Council. He came to Carnegie Mellon after he served a term as a dean with Yale University, and before that, he spent 19 years at Johns Hopkins University. He got his bachelor's degree in civil engineering and from the University of Pennsylvania and his PhD from MIT. So welcome to all of our panelists. So yes, 40 years ago, I was a 10-year-old. I grew up in Northern Virginia down the road, and so I am a Title IX baby. Title IX was passed just in time for me to take full advantage of that wonderful law, those wonderful 37 words. You know, I feel like Title IX has been the gift that keeps on giving in my life, and whether it's benefits I've got on the athletic playing field in my education, becoming an engineer, having a college scholarship, obviously, being able to win a gold medal in the Olympics. You know, I have had several career choices that have been in male-dominated fields, and all of that is as a result of this wonderful law that we celebrate today. Track gave me the self-confidence and leadership skills, physical stamina, and exposure to educational and professional opportunities that have really enhanced my life, yes, my personal life, my educational life, my career, both on and off the track. And so my first question to our panel really is, how has Title IX impacted your life? What impact has it had on you? I'm going to start, yes, with you, Jamison. Jamison.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I with Valerie was a little bit there a little bit earlier, and so we actually came in just as Title IX was coming into play. And I would say that what Title IX has really meant is that people have started to pay attention to and look at how they treat women, and making sure that when they make sure that they pay attention to it, then you have more of an opportunity to perhaps change things. I think that sort of the Title IX impact on my life really was sort of one is moving forward, always sort of being in front of the bow wave with it. So it means, though, that I'm also able to help younger women get through things. So when I look at Title IX, for me, it's saying that, so now I have this incredible diversity of people to work with who come into my field, whether it's in engineering, which is also what I majored in as undergraduate, or whether it has to do with who I'm going to be hiring for another kind of a program. It's made a difference in the people who are out there available to work on projects.
Yes, we'll just go down the line with this first question. Thanks, Rosalind.
Thank you. I think for me, it was the ability to grow up taking it for granted, right? It wasn't. We didn't feel like it was exceptional to be able to play sports. We didn't feel like it was a big deal to be able to take the same kinds of classes as our male colleagues did. Certainly, I mean, I grew up in a house full of only woman in a single-parent home, immigrant right over here in PG County. So suffice it to say, Title IX was the law of the land and the law of my household. Now, to have the privilege of serving in this administration, with this president and this Secretary of Education and this team, and have the kinds of role models that we do in Valerie Jarrett and Tina Chen and the cabinet members and the First Lady is something that is inspiring to everyone, right? And to feed off of that energy and that momentum and have the privilege of enforcing this great law that many, as we came in, said had been a little bit dormant. I remember very early on the head of the National Women's Law Center saying something like there had been a lot of slippage in Title IX, and to be able to, with the support of every agency in this administration, say no more slippage is about as much privilege and honor as I think any of us could have. The sense of urgency is still great, and we have a lot of work to do, but that I can meet young ladies like this to my left, where geology is also something that you can take for granted, is pretty extraordinary to see its success continue.
It's great.
Yeah, thank you to everyone before us who made it possible for Title IX. And like you said, I mean, I grew up thinking it was no big deal. And I did notice that there were many people in my life who encouraged me. I became interested in minerals when I was only 7 years old. And I would go around and I would ask questions and everyone would answer me. And it was like a natural thing to do, but my dad would take me aside and be like, you know, you're gonna have to work extra hard because you're a girl and you're Latina. Like, you might have to work extra hard than some of the boys in your class. And I actually didn't feel that growing up, luckily, but I was aware of it. So I'd like to thank all the people who encouraged me as a young kid to pursue geology because I was so interested in it. So, and then coming to Stanford, I was actually very surprised. One of the reasons I chose to go to Stanford was because about half of the faculty in the geology department are women. And I find that very comforting and very encouraging in the fact that I might want to become a professor someday. Maybe at Stanford, that would be great, or somewhere else. It's very encouraging, and it's been great working in the geology department because of that. And I see some of my friends, like my roommate is in chemical engineering, and I have friends in electrical engineering, mechanical engineering. There are many girls in engineering, but I actually recently took a class, and it was a little intimidating at first walking in and seeing probably over 70% were male, and I hadn't experienced that in geology. But so I hope that there'll be more girls joining the engineering ranks. But yeah, that's the start.
Great, thank you. Jared.
With all due respect, you might have been alive when Title IX was passed, but you weren't old enough to appreciate the enormous impact it had.
Oh, yeah.
It would have been unthinkable that half of the faculty in geology at Stanford would have been women when I was a student. I won't tell you when I was a student, but it was a long time. It was pre-Title IX. The one anecdote that I remember, which I think captured this well, when I was an undergraduate, there would be these stories. They were stories, but there was enough truth to them, that the handful of women every year who would show up at Penn Law School would be, first of all, they'd make them sit in the front row, and then the professors would torment them, humiliate them in front of the class until they got the point that they were well. And then they would leave. Now, who knew if it was true, but that there were just only a handful is itself a statement. And that there's probably enough truth in that is another statement. So things have changed dramatically from the 60s to where we are today. But we have a long way to go, especially when we get to the STEM topic.
So Title IX, we just had a wonderful panel of several athletes and others involved more on the athletic side of Title IX, and we know we've had success across the board. We've talked about it, more women entering and graduating from grad school and med school and law school, et cetera. So when it comes to these areas, how have you seen the benefits manifest themselves in the classroom? I'll start with you, Jared.
Now it's the case, of course, that I think majority of law students are women, which is a dramatic change from what it was. But let's talk about STEM, because it is, I think, the topic for our panel and a topic very much on my mind and on the mind of the president, the secretary, and a lot of people are concerned about the future of the nation. We've made progress in STEM. Another thing that you would have seen 30% of the students in the course you went into as women is progress. It was less than a handful when I was a student, so that is progress. How do we make more progress? I guess the simple answer is it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take resolve. It's going to take institutional leadership. It's not about the law anymore. It's about institutions embracing this. Let me tell you one story from my university, which is a success story, but it also shows you how far we still have to go. In 1995, 7% of our freshmen, our first-year students in computer science, were women. 7%. The joke was, we will know we've made progress when there are more women than Daves in computer science. Carnegie Mellon undertook to try to understand why there were so few women. And when the women did enroll in computer science, why they didn't stay in. And to its great credit, I had nothing to do with this, it predated me. They learned a lot, and they learned that they were the problem, and they were representative of all computer science departments. Basically, to give a quick summary, high-level summary, young men and young women view computer science more or less the same way, in terms of what it can do for them, why they might be interested in it. But women come with a serious experience gap and a huge confidence gap. The experience gap is the stereotypical computer science major is a boy, probably hasn't showered in days or something like that, who has spent his teen years hacking away on a computer, right? And is a superb programmer by the time he shows up in college. The young woman did not spend her teen years like that, so she doesn't have the programming skills that the boy has. That's the experience gap we're talking about. Having understood that, then we made it very clear that instead of pitching our introductory programming classes here, where all the boys were, we did it at a more reasonable level, where a reasonable teenager could stay up. The other thing we did was to create a support network called Women at SCS, which has been very, very valuable, making sure women have the same resources, overcoming the confidence gap that I was talking about. We went from 7% in 1995 to 40% in 2001. That's it. Very big increase in a short period of time. It's dropped back some. It's now steady state at about a third. Still too low, but much higher than the national averages. And the key moral here is if an institution embraces the issue, works to understand why it is the way it is, and then works to overcome it, you can make progress.
I would just like to add something to that and maybe put it in a perspective. Also with contrasting it to some of the success Harvey Mudd College has had in terms of improving its computer science representation. But just really quickly, some statistics. So women, even though you saw 30%, I'm not sure which engineering class you went to, but that was very unusual even today, because usually engineering is somewhere around 20% graduation rate in engineering. Computer science actually was around in the 20-25%, and then it decreased over time, and so that we're actually lower now than we were in 2000. And so this issue about what happens is really important. There are a number of different studies would be very interesting for you all to take a look at. One is the American Association of University Women's Why So Few, that talks about what are some of the issues and the gaps. Two studies that I was personally involved with were Bayer Corporation's Making Science Make Sense 14 and 15, which looked at women and minorities, underrepresented minorities in engineering. They showed some of the things that happened with women were a confidence gap. There's an issue with college professors actively discouraging women and minority students. So one study where they looked at one study showed that 40% of women who are members of the American Chemical Society met active discouragement by college professors while they were in college from pursuing STEM degrees. These are the people who actually made it. Right? So that tells you something about what the discouragement happens. Another study showed that college professors and the chairs of college departments of the top 200 research universities thought that women students were the best prepared academically to achieve in STEM degrees, yet women graduated in fewer numbers percentage-wise, but they felt that that was okay because they did the weed out kind of programs. There's something wrong, as you said, with the interaction. One of the ways I think you can encapsulate what happens and how Title IX is important to this is if you think of it as the 3 E's: experience, expectation, and exposure. So first of all, people have to expect women to do well. When you ask people to draw a picture of a scientist, what do they draw? They usually draw a male in a white coat. That's the same thing about your computer science majors, right? It's not a woman. So there's not an expectation that they're necessarily going to succeed or be interested in pursuing a STEM career. The other part of it is exposure. What do people do? What do computer scientists actually do? What do engineers actually do? What do geologists actually do? What are those careers? And I would add on, what do electricians and machinists, what do they actually do? So that that is seen as a possibility. And the third one is experience. So you have an opportunity to do internships. You have an opportunity to actually do this work, and that's where you gain your confidence. So it's experience, expectation, and exposure. One of the things that I would just add, what Harvey Mudd did, where they tripled their rate of women computer science students in 5 years, is they didn't actually change the overall classes. They created 2 classes for incoming students. So those that had a lot of experience with computer programming and software, and those who didn't have as much experience, so that they weren't getting overshadowed. But they were at the same place by the time you got somewhere around mid-year. So it was an artificial problem. So I think there's a way that we can look at that, and why Title IX talks about opportunities, because it's that experience, it is that exposure, and it's the expectation that makes a difference.
About that whole expectation thing, I really like that idea, because I always, like growing up, I realized that people would always say that math is hard. And I feel like that's not helping anyone to tell a girl that math is hard. Instead, like, tell her to work hard. Like, far too many times have I seen girls, like, be discouraged from high school chemistry, or even first year at Stanford. A lot of girls were like, oh yeah, I'm pre-med, and then they went through first year chemistry and dropped out. It's like, if you think you want to do it, like, give it a better shot. Like, you know, people should be encouraging girls to continue. Like, yes, chemistry was hard, but I knew that I would do better in my geology classes. I ended up getting an A in geochemical thermodynamics. So yeah, maybe the intro classes won't be that fun, but to push through, to encourage girls to keep pushing through and do the best they can do is important.
Say the change in the intro classes also help boys. Okay, so one of the things that I think that was that theme that was going through the previous panel of whether or not Title IX took things away from males. As we start to change the introductory readout classes and the STEM courses, and we say that we admitted these students, so therefore we expect them to be able to do well, and looking at it, how do we as professors actively get the students through the classes rather than weeding out, then that helps males as well. And we're having a problem even with retaining and keeping males, white males who were traditionally the STEM workforce, we're having problems keeping them in. It becomes really important for us to change some of these paradigms. Title IX has helped us to do that.
Just to second that, it's almost always the case that when a situation like too few women or women dropping out causes you to examine your programs and what you're doing, it results in overall improvement. And that's absolutely the case. It never fails. It's the right thing to do. You get better too.
So to kind of add to some of the statistics that May was kind enough to provide to us, you know, not only are we having too few women getting the degrees, we have too few women actually pursuing the professions once they, you know, get out of college. And, you know, women only comprise 25% of the STEM workforce overall. But women in STEM jobs make up 33% more than women in non-STEM jobs. So where we have women making 77 cents on the dollar across the board, less, you know, than their male counterparts, having women in STEM careers is a way to help boost those salaries and that income level for women across the board. So we know we need to get more women in STEM fields. Unbeknownst to me, I'm probably one of the people that has contributed to the decline in women in some of these careers. I got my engineering degree from University of Tennessee and in industrial engineering, and I actually did it for a little while. And we had a program with the Olympic Committee called the Olympic Job Opportunities Program. So when I got out of college, I won my gold medal the same year. And then I moved to a different school to follow my coach to a different school, and decided, well, you know, I got an engineering degree, but if I'm going to compete for 4 more years, I probably need to also start working a little bit to try to make sure that those skills don't go stale. So I did work for 3 different defense contractors over the next 6 years, and although I have the utmost respect and admiration and quite frankly appreciation for women and men in the military, that just wasn't my passion. And I realize now, as Chief of Sport for USA Track and Field, and I would work on developing sports science and medicine programs, I realized, you know what, if I had gone into sports biomechanics or sports medicine or tried to be an orthopedist, I probably would have stayed in STEM a long time. I think connecting women in particular with their passion and having them, you said that you had a passion for gems and minerals from the age of 7. And so that passion is correlated now to your education and hopefully then to a wonderful, lovely, successful career. So I really wanted to know what, you know, you've talked about some of the reasons for low participation and retention rates, but how do you think women role models really play a role in keeping women in, getting them inspired and motivated? And you talked about not really seeing women in those areas, seeing them having that exposure. Would seeing more, as we have more people going into forensic science now as a result of CSI and some of those programs, seeing more of that portrayed in the media, might that be a way to get more of the word out, to know exactly what these jobs are, what they do, and how women might be able to pursue them? So anybody can take a stab at that.
Okay, I'm going to do something with this word role models, something that bothers me. So role models was a really perfectly good psychological term that dealt with who you learn your behaviors from. And it's I think public figures are images. So it's the images of the possible. And I think where the role models come in are they're from the teachers and the professors, the folks that you're around. So yes, as we get more professors into the programs, it makes a difference, as we heard. It'll make a big difference. So I think the images are important so that when people draw the scientists, when they draw the engineer, that they draw people, or even have to stop and think, well, what kind of person am I going to draw, right? That makes a difference. I want to tell one story, and I told it before, but I'm not here, obviously, but it's a story about commitment and what we decide to do. So in the 1959, when they first started selecting astronauts, one of the docs who was designing the test for the male astronauts, he decided that he also wanted to test women. And there was a good reason for deciding to test women, because engineering perspective, they weighed less, their hearts were in better condition for the most part, they had less heart attacks. There were a number of other issues that said physiologically maybe women would do better. So they actually tested women who had over 1,000 hours of flight time. Many of the women had more hours than the male astronauts who were tested in flight. And the women did overall better than the male astronaut candidates. And then the program was stopped. So it was like, well, we don't intend to do this. What would have happened when we had Title IX, where we'd have had an opportunity to pay attention to it a little bit differently? A lot of this images and role models and what happens can be affected by people just stopping and paying attention to what they're doing. Why do you say, well, we don't intend to do this? You have people who have the flight time and that kind of experience. You had the physiological capacity. They did psychologically better on tests, but we just decided not to do it. Right? So I think images make a difference, but even more so it's a commitment to allow something to happen. Because I think you'll find that there are a lot of girls who want to do stuff, and then parents and other people tell them, well, you can't do that. That's going to be a problem. Right? So the girl says, well, they keep hitting their heads against the wall and they stop. So the role modeling, I would say, would come from the parents. Images make a difference, but the role modeling comes from the parents and the teachers and the professors they're around.
To add to that, it's also about ensuring access and opportunity, and in many ways transforming the way we think about our high schools and what we mean by college readiness. The jobs in the field we're talking about now are the jobs of the emerging economy, right? They will be those that ensure a kind of pathway into success in life. And the readiness to be ready in a STEM field really does mean to be ready for college generally. Today, though, only about 40% of our high schools even offer physics, as new data the department released is showing. Only about, offer physics in those schools serving the most African American and Latino students. Only about half of all high schools offer physics at all. Only about half of all high schools are offering calculus. So as we think about what it means to be ready for college without the need for remediation, in order to ensure that we meet the president's goal that by 2020, we're going to once again lead the world in the percentage of college graduates, it is about ensuring that teachers have the supports they need, that the kind of counseling that we've heard anecdotally and seen as we enforce these laws that goes on not only at the college level, but also at the high school level, counseling out and counseling selectively to just some students as opposed to all, that those kinds of patterns and practices change. But unless the pipeline is seen as one from elementary, middle, high, college, and career, we will be shortchanging the students that need the most. So it's certainly about vigorous enforcement of civil rights laws. The kind of role modeling that we've talked about, we really can't take for granted, and there is a kind of interagency commitment that we're seeing from Department of Transportation, from EPA, from Department of Justice, certainly from here in the White House in their Office of Science and Technology and Policy and EOP, where we are not only showcasing mentors and really celebrating them, because that's not easy, right? In the distinction between a role model and images and a mentor is one that is
degrees of how involved you are with that individual.
And the kind of commitment that it takes to ensure good mentorship is something that also ought to be celebrated, and we are promoting. The issue appears to be, as we're matriculating out of the sophomore year into junior year of high school, where you see equal access and success rates in all of the courses that prepare. But in those final last 2 years of decision making, something else happens. It's also about encouraging a work-life balance so that the decisions that too many that came before us had to make in terms of either or, and this idea that having it all was a myth, is actually broken. And we have learned a lot about our own administration, our own policies internally, and the president's first executive order establishing the Council on Women and Girls that is doing a deep dive across agencies, but also looking at best practices across the rest of the employment sectors, is something that we can learn from and try and incent and replicate.
I like to also agree about the whole parents as being role models. Like, I came from a family of biologists, so my mom's a molecular biologist, and I got to see her as my role model. And I think that the more women that go into STEM, then the more girls are going to be encouraged and watch their mothers go through the process. So for me, it wasn't as daunting as perhaps if my mother didn't do science. So that's one thing. And also, there are little things that parents can do to encourage their kids in their creativity. I see a lot of young girls and young boys be interested in geology at a young age. For example, they'll be like, oh, I love dinosaurs, or I love rocks, and they'll pick up rocks at the beach and bring them home. But then at the end of the week, the parents like throw them away. You know, it's a very common thing to throw away your kid's rock collection, so don't do that. It doesn't help. So if you keep that collection and teach them about it, they might actually blossom into something greater. So.
I would agree on the role models. My father was a math and science undergrad, but he was also my guidance counselor in high school. And so he had decided, I don't know how many years before, that I was going to be an engineer, unbeknownst to me. So he made sure that every year when he did my class schedule, he put on there math analysis and calculus and physics and chemistry and advanced chemistry. I was good for absolutely nothing else when I finished high school but engineering. So he made quite sure of that. I actually had a different question for you, if you don't mind. I wanted to kind of broaden it a little bit and just talk about Title IX and having more women involved in STEM careers and how that will have an impact on our economy. You kind of referred to that, Ruslan, a little bit in kind of the future in general. You know, how important is having more women? Birch Bayh talked about, I think it was Birch, talked about the fact that we're leaving 53% of the population behind and not having the brain power at play. So
former wife that pointed
yes,
that
actually,
out to him,
yes.
and it's a great observation. Indeed, the STEM issue is in the view of some of us, a national crisis. It's not just the lack of women in STEM disciplines, it's the lack of Americans in STEM disciplines. And the more women we can get into it, the better off we will be as a nation. It's absolutely central to the ability of our nation to compete. I don't need to convince anybody here of that, I don't think. The question, though, is how do we do it? How do we attract American kids, boys and girls, to show interest and keep and maintain that interest in STEM? We at Carnegie Mellon, these same women we attracted in computer science, are now very active in trying to spread the word, and I don't know if they qualify as role models, but to appear in middle schools and lower level schools as a model of a computer scientist, trying to dispel the stereotype that most kids have. We've also built games using gaming technology to try to engage very young kids in programming. Some of this has been quite successful, and more, using robots. Robots is represent a great hook for getting kids interested because everybody's fascinated by them. But to answer the question, I can't think of anything more important that we can do for the nation's competitiveness than to fix this, to get more American kids to major in STEM, and the more women, the better.
What's the crisis here? Like, what happens if we don't? 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now?
So you mentioned the sort of the existential crisis, if you will, is we believe America's success today and our success in the future is based on our ability to create new ideas, new products, to innovate. Innovation is absolutely, totally dependent on producing people who are graduates of the STEM disciplines. Not only that, but primarily that. If the latter goes away, so does the former. Now, let me make it, though, very specific. You mentioned you work for a few defense contractors. I can't tell you how desperate defense contractor recruiters are for finding American kids who are graduating in STEM. Because they have to be American kids, because they have to get clearances, and you can only get it if you're a citizen. They are seeing a crisis right now. It's extremely competitive for them to get the people that they need. So we're feeling it, and the long-term impact, though, will be on America's ability to compete in this very globally competitive economy that we're part of.
So go ahead, and then I have a question.
I just want to do something else. So the one thing about having more women, yes, we're losing 53% of our talent. So people might think of it as just a number of bodies question. But I think there's also a question of we're losing 53% of our perspective and our experience to bring to bear. Because people in their different experiences are going to see the problems differently, and they're going to ask questions differently. So if you start talking about innovation, that's the reason why it also becomes critically important that we have women involved, because they're going to bring a different experience base. So you're losing that as well. It's not just about bodies. And I just wanted to add something on to how do we get students involved. So this is where experience comes in as well. So we put together a program called The Earth We Share, which is students 12 to 16, that really difficult group where they start to fall out of the STEM fields. But what we do is we use students, all comers, whether they want to be scientists, whether they want to be reporters, whatever, and we actually ask them to solve problems. We ask them to use their experience base to solve problems. That's important because in some kind of way, students have to own the experience, and especially after you get into the sort of adolescent, teenage years, they want to know that their ideas are important and incorporated
incorporated. So we have to start to change our curriculum. It's not enough just to put people in front of folks. You have to let the kids do the hands-on kind of work, the experience that allows them to get their rock collection and hold on to it and say, Mommy, don't take my rock collection out, or to grow the potato plant. Those things are really vital and important. So it's really about a curriculum change. It's about having students invest emotionally, hands on, hearts on, minds on in the whole process. That's part of what we have to do. And that will also develop the kind of confidence that we need to see, that you're saying that girls need to be able to bring to bear once they get out of high school.
So, Gabriella, it occurs to me that when we're talking about girls dropping out at middle school and early part of high school, there's a similar parallel to girls in sports. We see a similar decline in the girls, as you said earlier, we were talking about earlier, girls, through up to elementary school, they're having great, opportunities in sports, taking advantage of it. 6th grade, 7th grade, somewhere in those, early teen years is when they start to lose interest and stop participating. Some part of it due, obviously, to the fact that at that point in time, we still have a disparity as far as the number of opportunities that there are for girls. I would like to know, we have a new campaign with the Women's Sports Foundation called Keep Her in the Game. I want to know from you, you're very young, and you have been in high school more recently than any of us on the panel. What would you say is something that we could do to better encourage girls to stay in the game at 12, 13, 14, 15 years old? And sorry, it's a B part to the question. What other things have you seen, or what things did you see in middle school and high school where girls are dropping out, losing their confidence, not pursuing a math degree? You referenced it, but you didn't really say why. So those.
That's a really good question. So let's see. So I think one thing at least that encouraged me to stay, I think, was a friend group, like a very good friend group of strong girls. And I realize it's hard sometimes to find a group of people that will support you. And I think it's all about the people, like your teachers, if teachers are encouraging, and also just other girlfriends or even guy friends that are very encouraging. And you can do problem sets together. That community, I think, is essential. And I see that even still in college, I'm experiencing the same thing, where I have a great group of people that we work together. So I think it's more of a small group thing. I don't know what you could do on a larger scale, but that would be very interesting to look into. As for also encouragement, in terms of awards, I think. So I didn't really realize what I was doing was that exciting until I got the Intel Science Talent Search Award at the end of high school. So I just was doing things on my own. I did research at the university, and I just kind of did things on my own, but no one ever gave me feedback saying, what you're doing is a big deal and that you could go to Stanford. I didn't think I was going to go to Stanford. I just applied on a whim. I said, maybe I'll get in. That would be exciting. And little did I know.
Please come.
Yeah, so I think if girls were encouraged at a younger age and maybe awarded at a younger age, they might be more likely to pursue things later on. So if you maybe in beginning of high school, the exposure, the experience too that you mentioned is really important.
So I know we probably don't have much time left.
Just in terms of exposure and acknowledgement, women who have STEM degrees or STEM fields, if they could stand up, because we did it with the athletes. Absolutely. That's wonderful. Absolutely great. For Ruslan, you had mentioned President Obama's administration and just being blessed to be in this administration at this time when Title IX was quite frankly in a place where it was under attack. And now we are celebrating the 40th anniversary and all of the wonderful achievements. What kinds of things are happening in the administration? How is the president taking a leadership role in this area?
How much time you got? So, look, I'm the stalwarts who helped pass this law 40 years ago would likely be amazed by the progress and truly stunned by how far we have left to go. Rights are under attack. Sometimes overtly, sometimes quietly. This president, from the I mean, Liddy led, right, we could go on and on. Fair Pay Act. Would we have known that it would take this president 40 years later to get it done? When we talk about the benefits to women woven through everything from healthcare reform to things like the Race to the Top initiatives in the department, where the only absolute priority that is a requirement was to ensure that underrepresented folks had access to this kind of curriculum that we're talking about in terms of STEM. We've talked about the mentoring across agencies that is really about showing what's possible. The research dollars invested in budget across agencies, right? That kind of research and innovation that we know we have to achieve if we are to maintain our place in this global economy, whether it be around increasing our green and electrical to ensuring equity in education. But one thing is for sure, whether it is the moral imperative that motivates, I'm sure, so many people in this room, or the demographic imperative when you look at the changing face of our country, and as we've talked about, the changing face of the workforce, or the economic imperative, because we cannot get to excellence without equity. We have to hold on vigorously to these rights and ensure that we enforce the laws that protect the gains that we have made doggedly. I could go on and on about the kind of harassment cases that we are seeing, sexual violence cases that we are seeing in harassment in the fields we're talking about. Getting access but not being supported, getting access but being alienated. And this is something that you can't stop, right?
And
we
is
can't
this at
stop.
all levels of education and in careers as well?
Yes. Yes. So there was one aviation mechanic. So it's also not just in your typical college, right? You're not talking about just your 4 years or just your 2 years. You're talking about in workforce readiness and in apprenticeship programs. And in the case I just was referring to, it's in aviation mechanics where the harassment was so bad, she had to drop out. Now, the Office for Civil Rights ensured that she was not only compensated financially for the loss, but what was entitled to her she would get, and that this culture that gave rise to that kind of tolerance of harassment would be sussed out and eradicated. And we won't alleviate that institution or any from monitoring until the vestiges of this stuff is gone. But we have to fiercely protect the progress that we've made and keep fighting with there is no, just like as Senator Bai said, Title IX could not be a panacea. There is no one way. It has to be woven in everything we do. And I didn't mean that in jest, right? I could go on and on about the ways that this administration is pushing this down to the granular level as well. Now, leadership is hugely important. And understanding that Title IX should be used on things like STEM access and success, and preventing sexual violence and rape, and ensuring fundamental fairness for us to achieve the promise of not only our public schools, but really of America. So at once we ought to celebrate again, but we got a lot of work to do.
Well, I know we only have another minute, but I want to close asking May a question. People find out I won a gold medal. They, what did it feel like, to stand on the victory stage? I really want to know, what did it feel like to be in a spaceship and go rocketing into space and beyond, the beyond, whatever. I mean, this is stuff we only dream about. I mean, what was it like? Tell us.
So I didn't prepare the answer to that one, but I'm going to give it a try. So I can tell you, well, first of all, you have all kinds of feelings. They're physiological, psychological, and other things. But to tie it to this, I will tell you that when I got up into space, I thought of the little girl on the south side of Chicago who used to always assume during the Apollo program that she would go into space, even though nobody there looked like her, and they had actively discouraged women, and I said women couldn't be involved. I thought about that little girl and what a huge grin she would have had on her face if she had known, first of all, that yes, she was there, because she always assumed she was, but also if she could have seen someone else doing that at the time. So it was an incredible experience looking down at the earth. You could see all the beauty and the majesty of it. And I had one other thought. So when I was getting ready, and this goes back to STEM, when I was getting ready on the morning of my launch, the person who dressed me was a young African American woman who was the first person to graduate in her family from high school. My life depended on someone who had STEM knowledge from high school. She had previously dressed SR-71 pilots. She was now dressing astronauts in their launch and entry suits. My life depended upon her, what she had learned. And so there was this connection there that was incredibly important. There was a connection with the world and a connection with the past and the future, and knowing that nobody else would have to go through the same thing to say it's okay to go into space if you're a woman of color.
That's great. Well, this has been a great experience for me, learning more about what you do and how important STEM education is. Make me feel even more guilty that I left that, but I'm hoping that I'm having an ultimate impact on the athletes that will end up in London in a few weeks competing with the support science and medicine programs that we put in place. So Jared and Gabriella and Ruslan and May, very much appreciate your time today. We appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Benita, and thanks to everyone. We're just about finished. I have to say, we all told little Title IX stories. I told you earlier I was a pre-Title IX baby, but I was not a pre-Title IX lawyer. So again, the other thing we haven't talked about is one of the things I did as a young lawyer, this was in the early 80s, is actually have to bring a lawsuit for a young soccer player, 9th grader, in suburban Chicago, and the Illinois High School Association refused to let her play on the boys' team where there wasn't a girls' team. They eventually gave in. We won. But I will say, I told that story on Monday to this audience in this room that was filled with the winners of the presidential scholarship, the high school students. And they all looked at me like I was from another planet. Like there was a time when there wasn't a girls' soccer team and someone would keep girls from playing soccer. And that's what we celebrate today, the tremendous path that we have taken. So I want to thank you all for being with us. We're not quite done yet. And when we conclude, after we hear from our last speaker, the young women in the audience, our Girls Inc. and Girl Scouts girls, will be going to breakout rooms where many of you, our athletes and our scientists and our coaches, will be playing role models, real-life role models. We want to thank you for taking the time to meet and mentor with these girls at the conclusion of our program, and we want to thank you for being here and being with us today. Our last speaker is another one of the great women leaders in the Obama administration, someone who's been a civil rights leader and a fighter for justice her entire career, who is now senior advisor to the president and really is the leader of his domestic policy agenda. So she's the person who's really overseeing the strides that we just heard from that we are going to be keep on making in this administration, pursuing Title IX and pursuing equal opportunity for all in education. So I'd like to introduce Cecilia Munoz, the Director of the Domestic Policy Council.
Thank you, Tina. Good afternoon, everybody. I am so excited to be here and so inspired by what we're celebrating today and by the many heroes that are in this room and that have been with us through this presentation. It's really, it just gives you the chills. I am also a pre-Title IX baby, and it's a real honor to add my voice to those who are, cheering for what we've accomplished over 40 years and who are doubling down on what we still need to accomplish because we still have a long way to go. I think Valerie may have started the day with her Billie Jean King story. I have one too. I was in about the 5th or 6th grade when she had that tennis match. And there was a lot of discussion on the playground about equality. I remember pretty vividly. I participated in those discussions vigorously. Right, and there was a lot of, this was back in the days when literally you were really told you could be a nurse, you could be a teacher, which are excellent things to be, but not the only things to be. And there is, that voice in your head when you hear people say that says, that can't be right, when you're a little girl. And there's also the other voice in your head that says, well, what if that is right? You know, what if I'm wrong about that? What if this feeling that I have that says I can live up to my aspirations, what if I'm wrong about that? And then I watched that tennis match, and it shut that second voice right up. And that's, you know, an extraordinary thing, and that's at some level what Title IX is helping us accomplish. It's helped us accomplish that over 40 years. But we also understand we've got a long way to go. And so it's important to remember that this is, of course, what we do for our daughters. I'm the mother of 2 daughters, one of whom lettered in a sport in high school. It's like an extraordinary thing to me that happened. We also do this for our sons, right? To be the kind of society where everyone can achieve to their potential, that makes us a stronger society, period. It's about girls and boys. It's about us as a society, as a community, where everybody has the ability to contribute their utmost. That's the kind of society that we're trying to be. And that's why, over the past 3.5 years, this administration has made it a priority to make sure that we are advancing Title IX, that we're advancing compliance, that we're ensuring that all Americans enjoy the equality of opportunity that the law provides to them. And we have done things like issue guidance reminding schools of their responsibilities under Title IX to take, and especially to take immediate and effective steps to respond to sexual violence. The Departments of Justice and Education have responded to thousands of complaints over the past 3 years and have launched several reviews and investigations to ensure that schools across the country are in compliance with Title IX. We're integrating Title IX into broader agency initiatives across the federal government, such as the National Science Foundation's recently launched Career Life Balance Initiative that's offering a set of family-friendly policies and practices to help eliminate some of the barriers to women's advancement and retention, particularly for women in STEM careers. So those are important efforts that we've undertaken already, but we all understand we can't stop there, and we won't stop there. So today, for us, it's an important day to look back and celebrate, but it's also a day to make sure that we're doubling down, that we're looking forward, that we are advancing the goals of Title IX and advancing the goals of equality. So as we celebrate this milestone of Title IX's history, this administration is also undertaking several new initiatives to advance equal opportunity for women and girls. So, for example, federal agencies across the government have committed to work together to produce common guidance on Title IX compliance in STEM departments. And the idea is to save universities time and resources and help them better understand what can be done to improve access to STEM fields for women and girls all across university departments. Second, in a further effort to clarify schools' responsibilities, the Department of Education is integrating information on STEM into the Title IX technical assistance presentations. They make these presentations available to every local educational agency all across the country. So the idea is to reinforce the critical messages of compliance throughout the K-12 system, throughout post-secondary settings. And the Department of Education is expanding its efforts to identify gender gaps. This is, as a policy wonk, this really resonates with me. They're making sure through what's called the civil rights data collection that we have the data to be able to highlight where there are gender disparities. And data is really, it's power. It allows us to show where there are still problems. That's the basis for attacking those problems. This is something that the department has taken on aggressively, and it gives us really new power and new tools for addressing discrimination, addressing disparities, and making sure that we tackle them in an effective way. Every decision made by those of us in public life impacts women as well as men. These issues aren't just a matter of policy. They are, as I said, they're not just women's issues. This is fundamental to whether we're going to be the kind of society that the president has charted out for us, right? One where everyone gets to contribute, everybody pays their fair share, everybody contributes, everybody has the ability to live up to their fullest potential. That's how we become and continue to be the kind of strong society. That's how we best live out our values as Americans. This is an important day to celebrate. This is an extraordinary milestone to celebrate. But it can't just be about celebration. It must be about looking ahead. So we thank, as Tina said, we thank those of you who are here, not just as experts and as heroes and as role models, but also as mentors. And we thank the girls who are here, who are participating in all of this. We do this because we believe in you so deeply. So thank you for being here. And all of you, thank you for everything that we've accomplished. And thank you especially for the work ahead. Onward. Thanks.
So that concludes this part of our program. Before we end, I want to bring up to the podium she's going to give us logistics, but I want to especially acknowledge her because today would not have happened, and so much of the work of the Council of Women and Girls would not have happened without the efforts of our Deputy Director, Avra Siegel. So I want to thank Avra. I want to thank all of you for being here and for participating, and everyone online for tuning in and participating. And let's just get out there and move and be active and support our women and girls. So, Avra.
Well, if I've done my job right, everybody knows where they're going, so I shouldn't have to say anything. But I'll just meet with April and Alice in the back, and we'll make sure that we get the girls to the right rooms, those of you who are staying here, and our mentors as well. So I'll just meet you up here, and we'll make sure we're good. But thank you, Tina, and thank you all so much for coming.